Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I would like to speak about an idea that I find has value currently. And the title of today's episode is Black Holes of the Subjective Realm. And I want to speak about how certain ideologies of a subjective nature can in some sense have within their subjective realm can have a gravitational pull. In some sense, I want to speak about the gravity of an ego. A black hole is a celestial phenomena that has such a strong gravitational pull that when light enters its event horizon, the light cannot escape. And so sometimes I've wondered if the idea of the true self, the idea of the self, is a sort of black hole. In some sense, when I've spoken about the language threshold, I began to kind of see a metaphor. I saw that I in some sense, at least the way Mr.Within kind of shares in this talk, in these talks, is that I say that in every moment there's an objective component and there's a subjective component. We're not only maintaining our intelligence as a being only in relation to our objective health, we also have subjective imposition that's going on, subjective expression. It's like, think of it this way, that your body has to move in order for it to stay active, in order for blood to flow. Similarly, the mind requires to simulate subjective realms and sometimes close those simulations. Both actions of opening simulations and closing subjective simulations can be seen as expression. You know, this is why for some people, the same beauty that they see in creation, they also see in the opposite. You know, the entrance is as important as the exit, in other words. So I was thinking about an object of a certain mass has a sort of gravity to it, you know, has a gravitational pull. And then the idea came that what if my sense of self, my subjective self, has a sort of gravitation, is pulling things in a certain way to itself, you know, a sort of unique gravitational pull of constantly the person having a sense of self, and that sense of self in every environment gravitating sensory perception into its own filter of meaning. So I can say that I'm starting to notice that many objective a lot of objective phenomena can in some sense be translated into a subjective relationship. I think there hasn't been many people who have attempted to identify a sort of black hole behind their eyes. I find if there are black holes in front of our eyes, there are black holes behind our eyes, certain ways that in the subjective realm, before the attention can move, it in some sense gets dissolved. It's as if it's kind of fascinating. You know, it's like religious ideology has a sort of gravitational pull to it. You know, all sorts of ideology has a gravitational pull in accordance to what has, in some sense, is in the proximity of that reality, that real experience. I find that the beyond the event horizon is the language. Okay, so here, objectively, we look at outer space. The black hole's there. It has an event horizon. When you pass the event horizon, you cannot escape it. You know, you just like this picture, you can see that the gravitational pull is so intense that it's even pulling light. So I have experience, I find, beyond the language threshold. And it's something that is not per se something you have to do. It's a purification of subjective molds of self. into a presence, into an experiential presence, and eventually man will realize that knowledge or the knowledge of humanity is existing in a certain wavelength. It's existing in a certain range. Beyond a certain range, literally everything our species has come up with does not help explain reality. You know, reality shifts. It's as if the eyes of the experiencer are moving quicker than the eyes of the thoughts, the subjective view. You see, an object can move, or let me say it, there are particles, photons, for example, that move at the speed of light. You know, that's a photon. It moves at the speed of light. What was the speed of life? Speed of life. Speed of light. I think it was, I forget the exact number. But just for the sake of education, guys, I'm going to tell you in this stuff. Okay, it's oh my god, how am I going to read this? Hang in there, guys, just a second. I'm going to tell you the speed of light. At a speed lesser than a speed of light, I'm going to tell you the speed. All right, guys. So I found the speed of light, in regards to kilometers per hour. I was looking for that, and it's 1,080,000,000 kilometers per hour. So you know, in the streets we're going 50 kilometers per hour. If we were going at 1,080,000,000 kilometers per hour, that would be the speed of light. I think the speed of attention is faster than that. The attention to light happens quicker than actually the observance of light, maybe. Anyways, guys, the reason I'm sharing this is because, in some sense, I find our species has had great advancements in the exploration of external technologies. We have not studied in internal technologies as much, and due to having to kind of filter the whole species in a mainstream normality, it's kind of like people just need enough to get by, not realizing that enough is not enough species. This is an interesting idea to consider. Subjective phenomena has a gravitational pull, but its gravitation is not occurring. It has to do with consciousness. Sometimes I thought that it's like you can't blame those people back in the day who thought the earth was the center of the world. You can blame them not being able to take in new information. For example, Galileo suggesting that we're not the center of the earth. But what I'm trying to say is simply that the attention starts from where it is, and that's where the world tends to be starting for the human being. So in some sense, we can say all phenomenology in the environment is centering, being pulled towards this, the center of the brain, where all the sensory perception is kind of accumulating phenomenology in one moment. Now, in the subjective realms, to kind of make this more simpler, right now, the objective component of my moment, my body is in a room. All this stuff, the computer, all this stuff is here. Even my vocalized voice has a sort of objectivity too. Now, as I'm sitting here right now, who I feel I am, what I feel the world is, what I see in the world, it's as if my imagination is a private room I'm in. And I see the phenomenology in this private room, and I can choose to vocalize it, I can choose to externalize the inner realm, and in some sense move the inner technology. However, my subjective realm is evocational. The precision of subjective phenomena has to do with attention and concentration and pretty much the various intentions and drives of the being. You know, for example, if I'm sitting in the moment and I suddenly feel thirsty, you know, that's a relationship of my subjective realm with the maintenance of my objective realm. So I'm kind of saying like your body is in one dimension, but your body is in one room, your mind is in two rooms. Your mind can administer the objective phenomenology, but at the same time it can also administer a sort of subjective projection of the world. So what it is it's kind of, just think about it. Imagine you're a soccer player, a football player, and you have the ball on your feet, and you suddenly find you're looking at the goal and you're seeing various ways that you can kick the ball to go in. All those options, all those potential parallel expressions of the moment, they are they are present as phenomena in the subjective realm. Okay, so the thing is, if we want to tell someone to think about something objective, it is easy. But we tell people to think about something subjective, the less objective imagery can come to the idea, we can say in some sense, the less of a pull it has to be a shape. You see, I've seen this in my life, especially being raised in Iran in my youth. By the age of 7, before my family immigrated to Canada, I would see so many people, and I would see the application of their personalities in the environment, in the social sphere. And in Iran, there is something that I realize Eastern cultures possess that Western cultures don't, is that there is more of a sort of freedom. It's as if strangely, how would I say it? It's not freedom per se. It's an openness. The social fabric is not tense. For example, in Iran, the ethos of the nation, even though the nation's kind of messed up, you know, but the ethos of the nation has a sort of fluidity in regards to people's minds. It's kind of strange, but people in countries that are struggling more have more of a care for one another. You know, if somebody who's played the same games as you have more of a affiliation and a common relationship with than somebody who's playing a totally different game. You know, an example would be is, imagine in the future, for example, you see another human asking you to play a game, or you see an extraterrestrial. Imagine our civilization thousands of years ahead has managed to accept for the first time galactic kind of citizenship of extraterrestrials from other sectors of the universe are coming here, and they're like, all right, can I be a citizen on Earth? And so now imagine, you know, you have a choice to, in some sense, engage the unfamiliar or engage the familiar. Most people, their minds tend to engage the familiar because their intelligence feels more prepared. But it is only a sort of wisdom that I can tell you that it's like the personality of the person can have a gravitation on its own. You can say karma is the gravitational pull of the ideological experience of the moment. Bam! That sentence, guys, is important. That sentence is incredibly important, that it is our eyes that are treating the world in a way that the world treats it. So there is a gravity to ideology, and this gravity to ideology has to do with how the attention embodies itself. You see, the mind is so fascinating, guys, that it's like the air in a balloon. and the surface of the balloon is like the human body and the ideological basis related to the objective realm. So you see, right now, I have this impression, I mean, that's something I pretty much share in these talks, is that when I'm talking to people, I want you to consider yourself as an advanced communicator and as a pilot of consciousness. These two ideas simply have natural origins. The first one, advanced communicator, means that, first of all, realize 2020 is an era of the evolution of language. We're here not per se to have too much external technological advancement, but we're here to evolve the inner technology to a point where the external technology is not afraid, we're not afraid of the external consequence. So it's like humanity, we had the industrial revolution occur, and then when language in some sense played more of a crucial role in history, then it was a sort of industrial revolution of the inner landscape. The subjective realms began to get resculpted in accordance to the kind of designs the environment gave. It's like back in the day, poets would look at, for example, the nature. They would see a tree and they would see this as a metaphor of life with invisible dimensions in the soil. But you can say nowadays in our environment, man doesn't see. For example, my mind sees the car, my mind sees the computer, my mind sees the various championed results of the external technological realm. So these all become part of the metaphor. So what I'm saying is that it's like the subjective realm is recycling the objective realm, and the objective realm is recycling the subjective realm. And man is a tension wavering between conscious multidimensional phenomena and unconscious voids. So this astronaut right now in this picture, what is that astronaut thinking? That astronaut is like, all right, being pulled into the inconceivable. The objective realm is temporary, of course, and it's not that it's temporary in certain forms. That means these atoms that are being me, it's like after I transition and my material body dissolves back into nature, it becomes one of those things where it's as if, were these atoms ever my atoms, or was I using the material elemental realm through a sophistication of various programs of intelligence just to be something for a little while and somewhere? There is a black hole behind our eyes, but that black hole ends up being how the free will was pushed into this reality. The personality of human beings has to do with, if their brain was an antenna, the type of waves the antenna is picking up, right? And the precision of a multidimensional awareness to a singular dimension. Some people feel that infinity only came about after there was the existence of a dualistic dimension. But really not infinity, multidimensionality, people think it's from one thing and then this one thing having multiple options in the same moment, a sort of multiple room situation. But for me, the first multidimensional expression of the phenomenology of this whole universal sector was that from nothing something came. That's the birth of the first duality, guys. In some sense, nothing, something. The room is lit, the light is on in the cosmic room, the light is off in the cosmic room, the light is on in the cosmic room, the light is off in the cosmic room. This on and off is the establishing of the first dualism, which renders a sort of conclusion that there must be an awareness in emptiness, and there must be an awareness to fullness, or fullness will never know it is empty, and emptiness will never know it can be full. So you see, it's a confrontation. Why do you think in these talks, guys, I'm telling people you have to find a contentment with all the potentials of your objective realm and all the non-potentials? That means imagine how advanced our species would be if human beings were not afraid of the void, if they were not afraid of emptiness, if they were not afraid of duality, if they were not afraid of the infinite. Aristotle tells us it's a sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. So similarly, we have to now entertain the phenomenology of the world beyond our own conceptions. You know what that means? That means treating your beliefs like friends. It's a strange idea that we have a relationship with thought that we feel it's a mirage. Thought is not a mirage. Everything that has design, that design is existence and imprinted somewhere. You know, it's not a, even though I use the balloon metaphor, the air inside the balloon is not separate from the air outside the balloon. What appears to be as the external realm and the internal realm beyond the human body, I cannot give any sort of comments on the firmness of reality. At most, I know that it's as if the objective realm becomes extremely still, which is death. Death is in some sense a return into an ideological stillness. It's as if your body is becoming thought. Now, when the body becomes thought, also the thought realizes it cannot be the body. Do you know? So in some sense, the memory has its last stand. What that means is the brain is like giving its last performance before the last breath. And in that last performance before the last breath, what happens is the brain gives itself ultimate permission, and the permission is forced by nature's will. So what that means is, dear humanity, if we are to become an advanced civilization, we have to care not only about the black holes in front of our eyes, but the black holes behind our eyes. And the black holes behind our eyes lead to the free will in the absence of phenomenology having the ability to be expression. Sometimes I remember I had an incredible realization from something so simple as picking up an object, like I was grabbing a cup. What do you call it? A cup from a cupboard to get water. And I got the most fascinating realization of my life, you know, that my hand instantly, I don't even doubt it, I don't even philosophically argue the right and wrong of my hand grabbing that glass from the cupboard. It's so instantaneous. It's like I don't prepare for years to just grab that glass, that cup from the cupboard. It's instantaneous. Do you see? And the reason it's instantaneous is because the subjective realm has the phenomena and its gravitational pull. Therefore, it means there is intelligence conscious of movement, and it's conscious of movement in a way where it feels it can originate the value. So what I mean by that is that my hand instantly picked up that glass without doubting. And then I wondered all the big things I ever had, all the dreams I've had in this life. Why did I feel they were not possible? Why was it that in an instant there was just an instantaneous moment of knowing in grabbing the cup, but for some things I doubted in my life. I had to plan, I had to strategize, I had to do a lot of stuff, and I wondered why. And I realized that it has to do with awareness of the subjective realm, which leads to the ultimate contentment. It is no longer enough to just see an animal living. It's not just enough to see an animal existing. We have now become the mind of man, the mind of humanity. The mind commands a greater stance, you know. There was an incredible speaker by the name Rick Rigsby. I want to give a shout out to him and a shout out to the channel called Goalcast. In Goalcast, there was there's incredible videos there. I hope the listeners check it out. But Rick Rigsby, wow, what a speaker. This man, of course, I think he was a reverend, so I could totally see how he was exposed to speaking to audiences. But this man said something that was so real. I'm telling you guys, when someone tells you the story of something really that happened to them, there is no greater story. We human beings are always questioning the intensity and the density of truth. you know, and the more we see realities are communicated clearly, the more the person will instantly know how raw the idea is. So anyways, Rick Rigsby, in this talk, he was saying that I don't remember it exactly, but it was very profound. He was saying that he went through a loss, and he found himself at a moment where he was in a funeral, right? And his father was there, and it was a funeral of Rick Rigsby's loss, you know? And I think, I don't know what it was, guys. I got really emotional, but it was like somebody very close to Rick Rigsby had passed away, and Rick Rigsby's father in the funeral. Imagine your son's greatest loss, and you as a father, you have to go stand beside that son, you know, beside your son, and in some sense, just in that moment, like Rick Rigsby, who's telling the story, he said it was a crushing moment for that whole family. And in that crushing moment, his father said to him, you know, just keep standing, son. Just keep standing. It was such a powerful. I gotta use my palms as tissues for this, guys. But the thing is that keep standing. Keep standing. Vision. Keep vision alive. You know, it doesn't matter how the candle flame flickers. Every person's mind is an allowance for existence's advancement. You know, it's I think we human beings are incredibly selfish, and that's why our civilization is not advanced, because we are going for the easy option. It's so easy to forget the world and just live in your own reality. It takes, excuse my language, but it takes balls to wonder about why spheres are in the cosmos. You know? Okay, maybe that was too extreme, but anyway. What I'm saying, guys, is you got to keep standing. Yeah, you got to keep standing. You know, trees have been preaching this thing that Rick Rigsby has been saying for years. You know, all that trees can do is just keep standing. You know? But it was an incredible story, guys, and the whole point of it was that the continuity of will. You're not here to just experience your humanhood. You're here to be aware of how the humanhood is being experienced. I find that eventually the psychology of the person reverse engineers out of a dualistic bound mindset. That means right now you may be looking at life and thinking, oh, that's good. Oh, man, that's bad. Oh, my God, I did something that was good. Oh, my God, I did something that's bad. Oh, my God, what's a better version? You know, what's a worse version? And so these various viewpoints are being entertained. But I find life can have a simplicity where it just becomes a presence of attention. And what that means is really you are observing phenomenology before identifying with it. And that's an incredible moment, because for the first time you don't get limited, or let me say it playfully, that relates to the theme of this talk, that you don't get stuck in the gravitational pull of a past belief. The new vision provides an opportunity where it's as if the person stops fighting chaos and stops protecting order. The person gives the world a chance to breathe before their subconscious momentum projects incredible structure. You know, I see life as a designer first, then you can bring in the emotional realm and make any story out of it. You know, it's like emotion plus character plus setting plus movement equals, in some sense, story. One may ask, okay, Mr. Within, you're saying there's an inner technology. You're saying the species is using language. You're saying that the species is in a linguistic simulation. You're saying there's a language threshold. There's a point beyond language. So what do we do with the inner technology? What do we do with any sort of intelligence in our moment? Now, I find two things really happen. Either there's the independence of the free will which chooses to author the moment. That means you choose to consciously build your moment. Imagine there was a Lego set and you had to build that Lego set. Now imagine life is a Lego set and your every action is building something, you know? And I got a very profound realization of it, you know. I realized that these mosquitoes that are in some sense, excuse me, these mosquitoes that are, how would I say, they're moving in a certain pattern. I wondered, they obviously don't have enough of an intelligence to know. So for a second I was thinking, could it be as if I was thinking very mystically, I was thinking, is it one soul moving these groups of mosquitoes? And then I realized, no. It's not that there's a collective being moving the individuals. It's not that it's like something hidden. It's just that each mosquito was reacting off the other mosquito. So it was like a group of minds in a sort of reaction oriented relationship. So for a second, I saw those mosquitoes and I'm like, they are doing something simple, but because they are acknowledging another movement, somehow all their movements become integrated. Do you know? Now, insects move differently than, for example, we see birds, guys. Insects, it's like you can totally see, of course they have a design. I mean, in regards to bees, you know, this is something fascinating that I didn't know. When I found out, I was like, wow, we need more nature programs on TV. And so what it was is that pretty much in a beehive, if you change the queen and you put a different queen of a different beehive, all the bees in that beehive will know the imposter and will try to kill it. I'm not joking. If you change the queen of one beehive with another, both beehives will declare war on their monarchies. You know? It's like the deception of the leader is the deception against the leader, you know? So anyways, what I'm saying is all the bees, they suddenly, it's as if like a piece is missing from their puzzle and the system gets violent, you know? So insect intelligence is in some sense, it's kind of strange, but it's like the first kings and queens, the first queens of nature, insects beat us to the monarchy, you know. Before human kind of crowning, insects had queens, you know. Just to finish the point, guys, pretty much just looking at the movements of nature, sometimes they are collective, sometimes it only appears collective because the individual, there's a sort of individual honor to, it's like when every person plays their role, suddenly the whole species gets a different role, you know. Birds, they fly like waves. If you just Google birds, groups of birds flying, you'll, let me see if I can find one. All right, guys, check this out. I found it. So check out this link, whoever is tuning into this talk. So in this link, you're gonna see how these birds are flying, and it's like as if considering that each bird is being its own world and experience, but it is responding in accordance to the movement of other phenomenology in its space. So we can say the reason all these birds appear to as like some collective wave is because their environment has made them feel as it's like they're abidance by the wave. It's like seeing how somebody else is flying, and then you adjusting your wings in accordance to that, and ultimately overall from an aerial, very aerial view, kind of seeing that it's as if like you can say that right now all these birds flying. Imagine each of them had a conscious mind, and each of them thought they had a destiny. Each of them thought they were journeying in the cosmos as a transmigrating soul. Imagine each of these birds kind of like imagine all these birds were Buddhist. So I'm saying that mindset would suddenly mean in this moment, it's like all storylines are a collective rhythmic abidance. And I find that the narrative of the future generations, the grand, the next revelatory phase of the ethos of the civilization will require a narrative that is going to be similar to this, where it's going to be collective, rhythmic realities, where it's as if each of these birds has its own free will. Each bird in this wave can choose to fly away. But why is it there together? Because in some sense, the abidance to a common rhythm leads into a collective expression. Like this is some next level stuff that birds are doing right now in this video, guys. So what it is a hidden language. It's as if all these birds are speaking the same language of the common, of the moment, of the present moment. I mean, I could have guessed it, guys. Any child introduced to the idea of God at an early age will eventually wonder about the collective meaning of all phenomenology beyond narrative. I want to speak a little bit more about the subjective realms, and I want to start off with a example of writing. For example, when a person writes, I'm a huge advocate of writing, and I feel that a person's intelligence amplifies when they have a sort of synchronization between their hands' speed of movement and thought speed. So when I write, if I have to write something that's let's say I get a sense that I got an idea, and I feel like maybe in 40 seconds this idea may go out of view. So in that 40 seconds, my hand at a really fast speed tries to write down the idea. So what that means is the speed of the image arising behind my eyes is aligning to the speed of my hand writing, creating the symbols on the page, right? So I find writing is a strange synchronization between the objective realm and the subjective realm. Of course, every movement is, but I'm saying like when it comes to writing, it's as if the person can be aware of their finger holding the pen and being aware of the page as well, and even the ink in the pen. And then at the same time, there's an awareness to, just like how you see your hand writing, you also see the various objective phenomenology moving behind your eyes, but you don't see it with your biological eyes. You're just aware something is moving as a sort of inner stillness, as if when we truly go within, it's like a wormhole. I don't know how to say it. It's like a donut. Okay, it's like a donut. That means we think on the other side is a sort of another world, only to realize it's an oscillation between free will's individual consciousness and in some sense the divine will's unconscious movement. And the only reason we consider the word divine is because we're wondering about how the world moves beyond our eyes. And if there is even an identifiable movement. There is this view that this astronaut, even if he gets pulled into the center, will not be able to see what's inside. If life was to be seen from a designer's viewpoint, it would just be shape. That means if you ask me, and from a designer's viewpoint, I will tell you, yeah, life is just shapes changing all the time. And while these shapes change, there is a witnessing kind of orb of the whole moment of sensory perception that is just moving. It's as if really on some level our minds are like these orbs moving on the surface of another orb. As I said, I think it was in yesterday's talk, that Terence McKenna said something that the poets have failed us. The storytellers of the world have, their fear has ruled their voice. And so I want to see, like, I feel eventually this will happen where a sort of new renaissance will occur. Technology is helping this, but an evolutionary return to nature also helps. That means the more you are in a natural environment, the more you naturally feel existent. The more you're in an unnatural environment, the more you feel you have to maintain the unnatural. So the mind turns itself into a mechanical problem solver. So this mechanical problem solving kind of archetypal mechanism, it's like, how can I tell you, it's a person learned a certain language, now the story they tell is limited to the language they've learned. It's like their speech is limited to the words that they know. You see, I tell people there's two ways I think that people can study the phenomena of language. For example, in my youth, I was shy because I was thinking about language in too much of a structured way. I thought it was like literally like, do you know what I mean? It was too, I was thinking my subjective realm was seeing the sentences first, then the image. Eventually it shifted at some point into where my mind would produce an image and then I would observe that as the moment, and then as I would observe that, then I would turn it into language. So sometimes I find myself having an ability to endlessly talk about these things because it's a picture I'm seeing and I'm like commenting in an art gallery on an artwork of my inner realm, you know? So so that's what I mean, that when the relationship of reality behind your eyes becomes more as a film than kind of like a linear structured language. There's a Zen story where this kid hears that there's this enlightened guy, this enlightened old man. And he finds the place of this old man, which is like his cabin is outside, like at the outskirts of town, you know? And in that kind of Zen-like culture, you know, you can say, Zen atmosphere. The guy goes there, you know, and he sees this man is sitting on his porch. This so-called enlightened man is sitting on the porch, and he's just silent still, as if he's just meditating, you know. And so this guy, the kid, goes up there. He's quiet for maybe like 20 minutes, and then after 20 minutes, after of sitting there, he's like, "Sir, can you please tell me what is enlightenment? I've come a long way." And the guy is quiet. And the kid keeps trying to speak in different ways. He's like, "Hey man, come on, tell me, what is this? What is this whole enlightenment show?" You know? And the guy doesn't speak. And this kid is there for he just waits it out kind of every day asking this guy. And eventually such a long time passes that he's like, "What is this? What is this? This guy doesn't speak." You know? It's like, what kind of enlightenment is this? You know, this man has nothing to say. He doesn't say anything. I've asked, how many questions have I asked? The kid's telling himself. And so what happens is the kid suddenly, last time he looks at the guy and he's like, "This is ridiculous, man. You don't respect people. I've been here for such a long time," you know? And he gets angry and he says something and he's like, "I'm leaving," you know? And he storms out, even though there's no door to slam, but he just storms out, you know? The guy is still quiet. The enlightened old guy is just sitting there, just chilling, just quiet, you know. The kid leaves. The kid leaves, and on his way out of town, out of that place, he just gets a feeling like shit. It's like, what other option do I have? Like he's thinking to himself, and he feels he was too rude. He feels like that guy was so strangely quiet that maybe he knew something, So something in his intuition makes him go back, you know. And when he goes back, and he comes to the porch, the kid just no longer has a question, and he just sits down. He quietly sits down beside the guy. And after the guy sees, as if there is no hunger of an ego in the moment, no hunger of an archetype, like the savage, the archetype has calmed down, the ripples on the pond is settled in the mind of the kid. He says, why this ceaseless coming and going? And this causes some sort of nirvana-like moment for this kid. This kid's like, whoa, why this ceaseless coming and going? Why this endless subjective charade? When the moment is simply being the moment. You see, there is two types of ability. There's an ability that the person concludes can only be attained through a complex possibility. And there's an ability that was there before. You're remembering an ability. You're not getting anything new. It's as if existence is just, it's being. It's just being here. It's as if our eyes are reawakening to it constantly as the days go by. So for example, we can say a black hole for the subjective realm can also be deep sleep. When a person is asleep, it's like, is there an ego there? Is there a person wanting to be enlightened there in deep sleep? There's no subjective filtration of the world. No need for an agenda of survival. When it comes to the mind, being aware of, the presence of the mind. The spirit of nature is a secret the body already knows. This biological reality, the moment it's seen as a program, it has backup systems. Nature balances itself before man does. And that's why when man kind of aligns to his natural being, in some sense, the way nature is being, he is also being. The mind is also appearing that way. I say this often, but in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, they say that consciousness is like a glass orb moving on many colored surfaces. What does that mean? That means just like that orb going on a, let's say, red cloth and feeling everything's red, and then going on a blue cloth and feeling everything's blue, and then going on a green cloth and feeling everything's green. So it's similar that every moment you go does define you to some degree, but it's like a lot of phenomenology is like just data being processed. The free will only is evoked when it's needed. Do you know? It's like before that, the being is going with the flow of the moment. It's like asking the question: have you ever had a moment in this life where you didn't want anything, and it's like you wanted nothing, and you wanted I'm saying, have you ever had a moment where you didn't want anything? You're just there in the moment. That's it. It's like there's no goal, there's no ideological vision. You're just existing in a moment, simply. If any human being has experienced that, they will realize that that's what I'm talking about. That's like a moment where the orb is not responding to what's the color underneath it. It is being stationed as the presence of the observer. The word soul, in ancient cultures, it animated a bit too much, so it got infused with the cultural program, so it got infused with the ego. So it's like many egos in ancient times were living with the idea of a soul, but because the soul became an idea, the word soul, by the way, in many ancient traditions comes from the word the breath, the breath of the person. For example, in Farsi, we have ruh, you know, which means soul, but in the derivation of the word comes from breath. And it's very simple to kind of consider how this linguistic term came about. It's because people would see that when a person died, it was as if their breath left their body. And they're like, whoa, did something leave that body? So due to that sort of optical illusion of the breath kind of leaving, there was this idea that, all right, the soul has left the body. I say optical illusion to be generous to the secular mind, but I'm telling you, reality has so many unknown dimensions. Our knowledge will feel void at some point in our exploration. This is why the author who cannot be comfortable with the empty page cannot also be comfortable with the words written on it. It's like inner intensity management to the living experience of life. A species not paralyzed by emptiness and nothingness, but a species empowered by it. A being that realizes there are forces in this world and the free will is the opportunity not to arrogantly wield but to use the system in place, as if civilization is like a tool that every human being must feel they have an access to. And that tool is the access to various inner environments. Right now, we are like, just like it's as if we have to repeat the hunter-gatherer society thing for our inner realms now. What that means is like the hunter-gatherer mentality was that before tribalism, people were just solo dwelling the world, maybe, you know, but then they became in some sense a tribe. So now what's happening is we have become aware of an inner realm, and we are going through a sort of similar evolutionary pattern where it's as if no longer we're considering the citizen of an animal, the citizenship of an animal in its civilization, but the citizenship of a mind. And the mind is, of course, it's not something you can put on the table. It's not tangible. It's just an opportunity of intelligent space for a certain time. And so really, once the civilization is wise enough to acknowledge its members, then the members will begin living for the civilization. Because that immediate disconnect of individual life with collective space is like there has to come a resolution to that. That means in every person's inner realm, there must be 10% of that inner subjective realm allocated in caring about the collective objective humanity. Think of it this way. Einstein said you cannot solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. What that means is the archetype you're entertaining in the moment of who you feel you are, if that archetype, if that moment feels limited, guess what? Beyond the limitations of that moment will require a different sense of self. Kind of how Lao Tzu, this Chinese philosopher, he says, You have to let go of who you are being now to become who you're meant to, something like that. That means treat every moment as if it's a visitation of a certain unique design of manifestation. Then life suddenly changes. You stop weighing the future based on your past. Your past just becomes memory, it becomes design at most. Accessible subjective design. The mind of man is truly a candle in the dark. This candle in the dark is left to its own intentions. That means your free will is piloting a certain sector of space in, whether you want to animate it or not, the divine will. The same laws of the universe that the scientist acknowledges, we see also the religious folk in some sense looking at the world and saying these laws are the will of a god. So what that means is whether we segment nature and feel like various forces are acting upon the same thing, we have a multidimensional viewpoint, or if we have a singular viewpoint that all we are like the thoughts of an unfathomable being beyond hierarchy, The world can move in many stories. Really, the attention of the human being and the human mind lives through stories. Look at what people are doing. All of media, social media, just our TV and television, everything is like people wanting to hear more stories, more stories. And it's like, what are those shows that survive? There are stories that people feel in relating to it, they're gaining something. It's like certain media can take away something from the person. That means, like, imagine an intense film, being a child seeing an intense film, like something like that. It takes away a sort of subjective simplicity from the child's mind. This is why children have to be treated like with the utmost ability of the human being to give freedom. Okay, guys. Sorry about that. I was the thing was on mute, and I was just talking. But I was saying this idea that if we don't make biology cool, the future generations are gonna be more inclined into being machines. And so really our survival as a species centers around how much we can make the whole spectrum of our knowledge as a species center around the preservation of the human of the natural human being. We have to declare nature above machine. What does that mean? That means the inner technologies are a return to nature. I call it an evolutionary return to nature. I'm working on a book called an evolutionary return to nature. And it's this mentality that we have to now be considerate of of the experiential position of our existence. And in becoming aware of it, we realize it's like there's a freedom, and you dictate how you receive your own unconscious. That's what I'm saying. So it's like you have to find a comfort with the vast loneliness of an infinite universe. It's like I realize it's something that every person, believe it or not, subconsciously everybody knows we're on a rock in the middle of nowhere. It's like, what is more common sense than that, you know? We're on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and we have made this nowhere, we have turned this nowhere, just imagine a space between the W and H, and now here. Nowhere has become now here, a storified now here, a sort of place where the mind can subjectively exist and have value. The whole thing we see about this wave of political correctness and the sort of evolution of feminism is that we are learning from our from what doesn't work to instantly work better. That's really it. There's no such thing as failure. There's just a parallel dimension of that reality was attempted, and that parallel reality led to a certain sort of feedback. You got to think of life as a sort of engagement. You know, it's like, imagine you're the only person in the cosmos, and so how would you explore this? So you would have to ask a question that surpasses the greatest questions that our ancestors asked. That's when our ancestors will be smiling in their graves because they see we have not ignored what we can be. The mind is an animative force. Think of it this way. Before the mage, the archetype of the mage, which is very prevalent in many writings, the mage was a being who wanted to use the elemental dimension of reality just like how they use their body. So the guy wanted to, raise his hand, and he also wanted to raise the oceans like his hand, or he wanted to direct wind with his hand the same way he would point. So it's as if the person wanted to, in some sense, master the pure elemental existence. Right now, the human being's mastery of the elemental existence is limited to the interpretation of biological movement, which is very, believe it or not, very subjective oriented. So there's ways that the human body is like hasn't been even studied. We have not even wondered about the evolutionary design as sophisticatedly as I thought the species would, at least to as much I'm aware of. Because the thing is, like, for example, guys, this was one thing you can say in life. There's these playful realizations that freak you out at first, then you start laughing at the inevitable. So it becomes, so it's like, how would I say it? I remember this is something strange, guys, very personal I'm sharing, but this actually happened where one day I was just looking in the mirror, you know I've come home after the day, and I'm just looking in the mirror. And I remember I was staring at the palms of my hands, both of them in front of my face, like in front of me. Like I was just looking at my palms, and for a long time, I was wondering, like, I was just looking at the biological human body, and I did something strange, guys. I put the palms of my hand on the ground, and for a second looked at the geometry of the biological body, and I wondered, whoa, it's unnatural for a creature to suddenly go off its a four-limbed creature to become two-limbed, right? And I wondered what would cause this, right? What would cause a creature to deviate from its natural biological design? Like, look at the elbows of the human being. Do you see? Look at how the elbows can move even beyond, like, towards your back. Do you see? So when a person does a push-up, the hands and arms are kind of like designed for that position. Do you see? Anyways, so I noticed a sort of objective design, but then a strange deviation of human consciousness and evolution of the mind from biological design. So really, A human being cannot search for mysteries when itself is the mystery. We thought the unknown is inconceivable, yet it's the conception that dictates the reference of interpretation. The evolution of humanity requires new programs entering the system. Does the vision move, or does what's in the vision move? I gotta tell you guys a story. Two Imperial guardsmen are bored AF. And so they've been guarding the palace entrance and nothing has happened and it's been a peaceful civilization, you know? And so one of them looks at this flag kind of wavering in the wind. And he looks at the other one and he's like, hey man, it's the flag that's moving. It's, you know, it's not the wind. And the other friend is like, the other Imperial Guard is like, nah man, the flag is moving definitely. You know, and so they're debating whether it's the wind moving the flag or the flag moving itself. And a Zen master is walking by strangely, and they go up to the Zen master and they're like, which one's moving, man? And the Zen master is like, it's the mind, guys. It's the mind that's moving. I gotta go. The Zen master goes, you know? So the mind that is moving is a suggestion of the origin of experience not having to do with limbs, having to do with awareness. It's like self is found in the awareness, but the awareness is beyond the self, obviously. This is how you know who you are, even though you have a different body than 10 years ago and a different mentality or experiential opening and of vision to life. So you see, the awareness is the relationship of an observer with the object is that it's not the object. And the relationship of the observer with the subject, that it's not the subject. But then the relationship observer with itself is non-conceptual. It has nothing to do with objects or subjects. It's literally how the unknown is being present in the known. It's like us asking a yin-yang symbol to explain itself. The small, like why there's a, you know, imagine the white sphere in the dark part of the yin-yang symbol. We ask it, why are you there? It's like it says, guess what? It's a reflective opposite of how you entered the room, how the subjectivity was evoked or even rhythmically extracted from the moment. So reality is fascinating, and we have to ask ourselves, where is evolution taking us? Like, how else is this civilization going to advance? And I think those birds were a good clue. Now, what's happening to all those birds in that video I put in the chat section is what may happen to the minds of human beings, where while that bird is in that collective rhythm, it doesn't think it's just the bird. The reason all those birds value that opportunity, because it's an experiential unity of a greater kind of subjective position. It's as if when one person does something that benefits them, great, you know, one person has life easier. So it's like you can be happy about when a species, when one person does something for the species, then it's as if the rest of humanity is clapping for like the Albert Einsteins of the world. Because it's important that we don't ignore what is here. There is a humanity that is an ancient development. It's like this project of the crystallization of will. Our ancestors lived in the world, and the way they lived influenced how thoughts and ideology in some sense came. They say winners write history, true, but the story being passed on, it's as if the winner had to put in the loser, had to put in the opponent. So it's like competitive value in history, regardless of who wrote history, was that the winner, even though it wrote it as if it won, but it did not eradicate the loser. I mean, sometimes there was certain tragic things that happened, which kind of can suggest to how blind ideological worship is like a bulldozer over creativity. In the sense that there was this story, I remember hearing it from Isaac Asimov in a video where he was saying Oman, this sort of Arabian warlord, came to Islamic kind of army head. He, in some sense, they came to the libraries of Alexandria, and they conquered, and in some sense they were thinking of what Oman was thinking of what to do with the library. And they say the guards come and ask him, and they say, what should we do with the rare library, these books in the library? And this is the savageness of ideology, guys. You know, this is the dark side of language. That in some sense, Oman says, I don't know if it's Omar or Oman, I think it's Omar. But anyways, he says that if the books resemble what's written in the Holy Islamic book, in some sense they are not needed. And if they deviate from it, they are not needed. So pretty much there was a justification of an ideological massacre that occurred because one ideology was claiming itself as the source of reality. Now, there is nothing wrong with the personal, subjective realm of the person, like dimension. That means you can believe anything. You can animate, just like how the child makes a teddy bear come alive. A person can make any idea come alive. Do you know? You can in some sense behind your eyes even be the God that you're worshiping. Do you know? Imagine if in religious writings it was written that the only way to kind of go to heaven is being God. So every person would suddenly take in the words in accordance to faith. Therefore, it would be an acceptance of subjectivity without wonder. Now, I'm not kind of bashing religious ideology here, guys. I'm just saying that ideas, just like how human beings have relationships with one another, ideas are born out of the relationships of man with his environment and man with other men. What I mean by that is, like, I'm speaking on a human level. So I'm saying it's like, please hear me as a universal being, guys. I'm saying this in the sense that we are minds before we are bodies, so we shouldn't freak out about objective difference too much, you know. But what I'm saying is, like, the idea is kind of like there's many metaphysical openings to reality. Man, after worshiping objectivity and objectivity being slapped out of his hand, he began worshiping subjectivity. And really, there was a benefit in the worship of subjectivity that it led to the development of culture. Do you know? So what I'm saying is I'm not here to judge the past. The past did what it could. I'm just here to say that the modern mind deserves the freedom from ancient views, but at the same time doesn't mean it shouldn't have access to the ancient views. It's all about realizing that where is your freedom starting from? Is it starting from your moment, or are you searching for freedom in another moment? You know, is the freedom you seek in your past or in your future, or can it only be here because the experience of the past and future are still experiences of the moment? So anyways, guys, ideas, of course, can be savage. You know, we are not a fully civilized species. If we were, violence wouldn't be in our news. Invention would be in our news. Language has, we can say everything in life gets influenced by the chaotic movements of life. Inevitably, there is inefficient activity occurring in the same streets as efficient activity. Now, if the efficiency feels defeated by the inefficiency, that means reality's social position is like a confusion of freedom with anarchy. Life is not about escaping one dimension and going to another. It's about the maintenance of multiple dimensions as the intelligence opens up to the to the waking state of the day. Yeah, the collective enlightenment means that no longer people are like think enlightenment is an individual attainment. It's that's foolishness. It's not foolishness. It's like you can always paint a picture and just keep staring at that picture, or you could wonder about how the next picture of the civilization is a. It has to be a collective movement. I mean, why are there so many individual human beings around? You know what I mean? It's like, why is there 8 billion human beings on a rock in the middle of nowhere? Like, obviously, there has to be some collective effort happening. And so really it's kind of realizing that ideas, for me at least, ideology can become alive. That means I'm not like when I speak, for me it's like language is not just like a file cabinet. I'm like, all right, time to take out this file, you know. It's not like that, you know. For me it's like it's alive. Okay, when it's alive it's important, it's experiential, you know. You know, there was I forget the guy's name. I think it was Abu Ali Sina, or I could be wrong. It could have been Sadi. I don't know. It was somebody. They asked them, how are you so polite, man?" And he's like, "I learned from the rude, you know." And he learned from the opposite of his reality as much as he learned from the reality he found himself. That's what the confrontation of the void, when I say every human being is subconsciously reacting to emptiness, and this is why emotional stability is a priority over logical success. Emotional stability means we see as if we're all journeyers, we're all tourists in manifestation. So we're like, all right, before we get super advanced technology, let's make the journeyers, the tourists, have a pleasant experience. So it would be think of it this way, guys. How fascinating and hilarious would it be? Right now, the planet is like, oh, there is suffering and, you know, world hunger, and many people in countries, you know, children are dying because their society has forgotten them, is treating them like objects, like rocks, you know. But I feel that it's, if all the nations, if somebody went up and asked the United Nations, it's like, what is this paradox game? Is it one nation, or what's the point of United Nations? And so if we were a united nation, how hilarious. How could one nation fight itself? Only because we're separate nations, we're fighting over resources. But if we were one nation, how could one nation fight itself? Do you see? So we have to say, how cool would it be if the Tower of Babylon was attempted to be built again? And I think that's what the mind of man is here, actually. That we are here to find some sort of grand subjective allegiance towards the next opening of the archetypes of humanity to a sort of galactic, how would I say it? It's as if we are not just storifying what's on Earth, we are also storifying what's beyond our clouds. We are, storification is a term I guess, I don't know, it probably doesn't have, it's not a, I don't know if it's a word, but the way I'm using it is when you either bring a phenomena into a story or put a story into a phenomena. The acknowledge of presence. Presence is the new soul. Presence is attributeless. It is awareness being space. simply. And then the selfhood and the subjectivity, then there's, do you feel that space when you're free from not just thought, but from the, you can observe the linguistic, you can observe language like you observe objectivity, and then the mind is free from its own content. Marcus Aurelius, he says, the soul is dyed with the colors of its thoughts. The voice of the environment is just the voice. The voice of the inner dimensions is also just the voice. Everything is simplicity holding complexity, or the moment the creature navigates an individual consciousness, it becomes complexity holding simplicity, and that gives the advantage of infinitude. Do you know? So anyways, so guys, thanks for tuning in. I want us to collectively hope that this astronaut didn't get pulled into this event horizon. Let's hope teleportation technology was invented and the guy was just, his buddies teleported him out of the event horizon. I don't know how gravity would occur for teleportation, but that'd be an interesting idea too. If the portal that opens up to save this guy it has the gravitation of the black hole has an influence on that technology. Anyways, guys, study the self. It's the opportunity of a lifetime, because that self is life. Much blessings, and namaste.